Ethan Cole woke up before sunrise. The air was cool, and the smell of dry grass filled his small wooden house on the edge of the Arizona plains. He rubbed his eyes, drank a cup of black coffee, and looked out the window toward his empty pasture. His old cow had died 2 weeks ago, and without her, milk and butter had run out. Life on the ranch was quiet but hard, and every day felt heavier without anyone to talk to. Ethan decided that morning he would ride to the trading post and buy a new cow. He saddled his horse, packed a small bag of coins, and started down the dusty road. The journey took most of the morning. The sun rose bright and sharp, painting the sky in pale gold. Ethan passed dry riverbeds, cactus fields, and a few wagons heading to town. When he finally reached the trading post, he could already hear shouting. A small crowd had gathered near the pens where livestock were kept. Curious, he tied his horse and walked closer. That was when he saw her for the first time. An Apache woman standing near a man who seemed angry and drunk. Her eyes were calm but filled with strength. She stood tall despite the crowd's laughter. The trader, a red-faced man named Harris, was arguing with an older Apache man. Harris claimed the tribe owed him supplies, but the elder insisted they had paid fairly. The argument grew louder, and the crowd joined in, mocking the Apache people. Ethan usually avoided trouble, but something about the woman's steady look stopped him. She didn't shout or cry. She only watched, quiet and proud, as if she carried centuries of patience in her eyes. Ethan stepped forward and told Harris to calm down. His voice was low but firm, the kind that made people stop for a second. Harris frowned, muttered something, and backed off. The crowd lost interest soon after, drifting away like dust in the wind. The elder thanked Ethan with a slow nod. The woman, who the elder called Nayeli, gave him a quiet smile. Ethan nodded back and went about his business, checking prices for livestock. But he couldn't shake the image of her standing in the sun, so strong yet so alone. When he returned to his horse, the elder was waiting again. He spoke slowly in broken English. He explained that Nayeli had lost her family to sickness during the last winter. She had no one left, and though her tribe respected her, there was no clear future for her in the camp. The elder looked Ethan in the eye and said, "You helped her today. Maybe you can help her tomorrow too." Ethan didn't understand at first. The elder told him that Nayeli needed a home, someone to protect her, teach her, and give her peace. "She's a good woman," the elder said. "Strong, honest, she will work. She will learn your ways." Ethan felt his heart beat faster. He had only come to buy a cow, not change a life. "I'm just a rancher," he said softly. "I live alone. I don't know your ways." But the elder placed a hand on his arm. "Then you both learn together," he replied. Ethan spent the next hour walking through the market, trying to clear his mind. He watched the wagons roll by and listened to the calls of merchants. But the thought of leaving her behind made him uneasy. Something about her calmness had touched something buried deep inside him, the same part that had grown tired of silence and loneliness. When he finally turned back, Nayeli was helping an old woman carry supplies. Her kindness seemed effortless. She noticed him watching and walked toward him slowly. "You helped my elder," she said softly. "Thank you." Her English was simple but clear. "You are welcome," Ethan replied, feeling awkward. They stood there for a long moment. Then, surprising even himself, Ethan said, "If you need a place, you can come to my ranch. I will treat you fair." Nayeli looked down, her hands folded. The elder stepped closer and nodded. "She will go," he said. "She promises work and respect. You promise the same." Ethan felt like the ground shifted beneath him, but he agreed. By evening, the sun burned orange over the horizon as Ethan and Nayeli rode home together. She sat quietly behind him on the horse, her hands lightly holding his coat. The road stretched long and empty, dust rising from the hooves. Neither spoke much. Ethan tried to find the right words, but couldn't. He thought about his mother's old words. "Sometimes what you need finds you when you aren't looking." He wondered if this was one of those moments. When they reached the ranch, the sky had turned purple and the first stars appeared. Ethan showed Nayeli the small wooden house, the barn, and the fenced field. She looked around silently, touching the rough wooden beams with curiosity. "This is your home now," Ethan said quietly. She looked at him, eyes shining in the dim light, and nodded. "I will make it good," she said simply. That night, as Ethan sat by the fire, he listened to the soft sounds of her moving around the house. She was sweeping the floor and humming a tune in her native language. The melody was gentle and full of longing. Ethan stared into the flames, realizing how strange and yet peaceful the day had been. He had gone to buy a cow, and instead a woman with courage and grace had entered his life. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years he didn't feel alone. Before going to bed, he stepped outside. The moonlight painted the land silver. He saw Nayeli standing by the corral looking at the stars. He walked toward her, careful not to startle her. "You miss your home?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Yes, but maybe I find new one." Her voice was soft but full of hope. Ethan looked at her for a moment, then at the open land stretching around them. He didn't know what the future held, but he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace mixed with purpose. As they stood there under the wide sky, the wind carried the scent of rain. The silence between them was not empty but gentle, like a promise waiting to be spoken. Ethan thought of the cow he never bought and the unexpected turn of fate that had brought Nayeli into his life. Maybe this was how life worked. When you stop searching for what you think you need, something more important finds you. That night in the quiet ranch house, two souls from different worlds shared the same roof for the first time. Neither knew what the coming days would bring, but both felt that something had begun, something kind, fragile and real. Ethan Cole woke before dawn, the sky still dark above his quiet ranch in the Arizona plains. He lit his small lamp and drank a cup of strong black coffee, the way he did every morning. The house was still, only the wind pushing against the wooden walls. He had been living alone since his parents passed, and the silence had become both friend and burden. His only cow had died 2 weeks earlier, and today he planned to ride to the trading post to buy another. He saddled his horse, pocketed the few coins he had saved, and set out on the long, dusty road. The sun climbed slowly as he rode. He could see the faint lines of the mountains far away and smell dry grass in the air. The trading post was crowded that morning. Wagons, horses, and people filled the open yard, all talking, trading, and shouting. Ethan tied his horse near the fence and walked toward the pens. As he checked the livestock, a loud argument broke out nearby. Curious, he looked up and saw a scene that made him stop. A local trader was yelling at an older Apache man. The trader's face was red with anger, and his voice was full of hate. Around them, people laughed and whispered, enjoying the fight. Standing beside the elder was a young woman. Her dark hair braided, her face calm, and her eyes unafraid. She was dressed in simple woven cloth and stood tall despite the noise around her. Ethan watched her quietly. Something about her stillness in that moment struck him more than the shouting itself. The argument grew worse. The trader accused the elder's people of owing him goods, and the elder tried to explain that the deal was already settled. The young woman spoke softly in English, saying they had paid fairly. But the crowd laughed at her, calling her names. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. He wasn't a man who liked to fight, but he couldn't watch it any longer. He stepped forward and said, "That's enough." The words came out stronger than he expected. The trader glared at him, but Ethan didn't back down. His voice was calm, firm, and carried the weight of a man who had worked hard all his life. "You got your payment," Ethan said. "Let the matter rest." For a long second, no one spoke. Then, grumbling, the trader backed away. The crowd slowly lost interest and went back to their business. The young woman looked at Ethan, and their eyes met. She nodded once in quiet thanks. After that, Ethan returned to looking at the cattle, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about her. She carried herself with quiet pride, and there was something in her expression, sorrow maybe, but also strength. When he was about to leave, the old Apache elder approached him. His English was broken, but his meaning was clear. "You helped us," he said. "You have good heart." They spoke for a few minutes, and Ethan learned that the woman's name was Nayeli. Her family had died during a harsh winter, and she now lived with the tribe but had little left of her own. The elder said she needed a place where she could start again. Then he looked Ethan in the eyes and said words that caught him by surprise. "You have no one. She has no one. Maybe you help each other." Ethan didn't know what to say. He had only come to buy a cow, not to take a woman home. "I don't know your ways," he said quietly. The elder smiled gently. "Then you will learn together." Ethan walked away to think. He leaned against the fence, watching the dust rise from the wagons. His heart beat fast. The first few weeks on the ranch passed quietly. Ethan woke early each morning as he always did, but now he heard sounds he hadn't heard in years. Nayeli's soft footsteps, the sound of a broom sweeping the porch, the smell of cornmeal cooking on the stove. She worked hard from sunrise to sunset, and though she spoke little, her presence filled the house with calm energy. Ethan tried to show her how to handle the animals, fix the fences, and tend to the garden. At first, she watched carefully, copying his movements, but soon she began doing tasks on her own. He often found her feeding the chickens or gathering water before he even asked. Each day, they grew more comfortable around each other. Nayeli learned more English words, and Ethan picked up a few Apache ones. In the evenings after dinner, they would sit by the fire. Sometimes she told him stories from her tribe, stories about the wind that could speak and rivers that remembered. Her voice was gentle and slow, carrying warmth through the room. Ethan listened quietly, enjoying the way her stories filled the lonely silence. When she laughed, it was soft and short, but it made something inside him feel alive again. One evening, Ethan took her to town for supplies. It was the first time they had gone together. People stopped and stared as they walked down the main street. Some whispered, others crossed the road to avoid them. Ethan kept his head high, pretending not to notice, but he could feel the tension around them. Nayeli walked beside him with quiet dignity, her chin raised slightly, refusing to show fear. Inside the store, the clerk greeted Ethan coldly and ignored Nayeli completely. When Ethan asked for sugar and flour, the clerk pretended not to hear until Ethan repeated himself louder. As they left, a man outside muttered a rude word about her. Ethan stopped, turned around, and looked straight at him. His calm voice carried across the street. "You'll speak with respect or not at all." The man looked away, embarrassed. Ethan took Nayeli's hand gently and led her toward the horse. She didn't say anything, but when they rode home, he noticed her eyes shining with emotion. Later that night, she whispered, "No one ever spoke for me before." Ethan just said, "You don't have to face the world alone anymore." Their bond grew stronger after that day. They worked side by side during the long summer days, fixing fences, clearing brush, and tending the cattle. Nayeli planted wildflowers near the house and hung small hand-woven charms by the windows. The ranch began to feel warmer, brighter, more alive. Ethan often caught himself smiling without realizing it. He started talking more, telling her about his parents, his childhood, the long years he spent trying to keep the ranch running alone. She listened quietly, her eyes kind and understanding. One afternoon, a storm rolled in from the west. The sky turned dark gray and thunder echoed over the plains. Ethan ran to the barn to secure the animals, but the wind was fierce. Rain started to fall hard, turning the ground to mud. Without a word, Nayeli joined him, helping tie the gates and lead the frightened horses inside. The storm grew worse. Lightning flashed and water poured through the open roof. Ethan shouted for her to stay in the house, but she refused to leave him. "We finished together," she said. They worked through the night, soaked and shivering, fighting the storm's strength. By morning, the rain stopped and the sky turned pale blue again. They stood by the corral, covered in mud but smiling. The animals were safe and nothing was lost. Ethan looked at Nayeli, her hair dripping wet, her face tired but glowing. In that moment, he realized how much she meant to him, not just as someone who shared the work, but as someone who gave his life meaning again. He wanted to tell her, but the words felt heavy in his throat. Instead, he just said softly, "Thank you." She smiled and answered, "We are strong together." The weeks that followed brought peace. People in town still whispered, but Ethan stopped caring. He began to notice small things, how Nayeli's laughter made the house feel lighter, how her songs made the evenings feel shorter, how her presence turned the lonely ranch into a home. They would sometimes ride together along the river in the evenings. She liked to collect smooth stones and tell him which ones, in her belief, carried good spirits. Ethan didn't understand the old traditions, but he listened with interest, happy to hear her speak freely. One morning, as they worked near the barn, an old Apache elder arrived on horseback. It was the same man Ethan had met months ago. He dismounted slowly and smiled when he saw them. Nayeli ran to greet him and spoke quickly in her native language. The elder nodded, then turned to Ethan. "She is happy," he said in English. "You have given her peace." Ethan shook his head modestly. "She gave it to me first," he replied. The elder looked between them and said, "You both have found something strong. Keep it." Then he placed a small beaded charm in Ethan's hand. "For your home," he said, "to remind you that love can grow in strange places." With that, he rode away, leaving them both standing in silence. Nayeli touched the charm and smiled. "He says we are one heart now," she whispered. Ethan looked at her and felt his chest tighten. "I think he's right," he said quietly. That evening, they stood on the porch watching the sunset. The land stretched wide and calm before them, golden light washing over the hills. The sky burned orange and pink, fading into deep blue. Nayeli leaned against the railing, her hair glowing in the soft light. "When I came here, I was afraid," she said. "I thought I lost everything, but now, I think the wind brought me where I needed to be." Ethan turned to her, his voice low. "And I thought I was just going to buy a cow," he said with a faint smile. She laughed, a small, warm sound that melted the last bit of distance between them. They stood side by side as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The air smelled of grass and rain. Ethan felt peace settle deep inside him, a peace he hadn't known in years. He looked at Nayeli and saw not just the woman he had brought home that day, but the future he hadn't dared to dream of. As darkness covered the land, she reached for his hand. "You came for a cow," she said softly, "but you found me." Ethan smiled and squeezed her hand gently. "I found more than that," he said. "I found my heart again." The stars appeared, bright and endless above them. The wind moved through the fields, carrying the quiet promise of tomorrow. And there, on that small ranch in the middle of nowhere, two hearts that once walked alone had finally found their home.